Hey everybody, it's Casey Kasem. I'm bringing you a brand new episode of Get Real with Casey Kasem. And on this episode, I had the Bob Lung come on and talk with me. He's most recognized for his Fantasy Football Consistency Guide. It was chosen by the Fantasy Sports Writers of America as the best fantasy football publication in 2018. You may also know Bob from his website, bigguyfantasysports.com. He is also the brains behind King's Classic Draft and the Midwest Fantasy Football Expo. I had a great time talking with Bob, and if you're not already following him, you should on Twitter at Bob_Lung. You can also give me a follow on Twitter at DCaseyKasem. You can find the podcast Twitter at GetReal_pod. Make sure to check out my writing over with the Fantasy Footballers and with Fighting Chance Fantasy. And also make sure you subscribe to this podcast. Rate and review would be awesome as well. You can find this podcast as part of the DAP network. Go ahead and check all those homies out over there because they're awesome as well. I hope you guys have a great time with this one because I sure did. And here we go with Bob Lung.
Where you live? I forget, you told me before, I'm sure, but...
It's north of Dallas.
Oh, that's right. You're in the Dallas area. Right. One day I made it down that way. So one of my, it would be my wife's cousin, and we're very close family between the two of us. He has 3 sons. I have 3 daughters. But one of his sons just took a job with AT&T in Dallas.
Okay, yeah.
And so maybe someday we'll have to go down there and visit. But or at least now I can go down. I have someplace to stay with him. But
yeah, it's pretty cool. Some of us are planning on coming out to Ohio.
Yeah.
We didn't get to do that, but
I really hope all this crap gets tied up or cleaned up before next August. I'd be very upset if we can't do this 2 years in a row. That's for sure. There were so many people jacked up for it. Yeah, everybody's kind of like, yeah, we don't care. We're coming. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, okay.
Yeah, but I care. I want to make sure everybody's good and healthy.
Yeah, my worst nightmare would be like somebody comes and gets it and dies, and I'd be like, I'd never live with myself.
For fantasy football.
Yeah.
Dying for fantasy football, but yeah.
I'm pretty sure my wife would pretty much commit that, yeah, I would probably do that. So she's like,
I mean,
you get a lot of money. Come on. I told her, yeah, there's a hell of an inheritance,
There you go.
Or insurance money, I should say. So
that'll work. I convinced my wife to let us go. So it was like when we were like, well, we're still going to go anyway because she has a friend that lives in Cleveland, I think.
Oh, okay. Did you come to the area then?
Well, we ended up just canceling. Yeah, we got a credit for the flights and stuff. So she's like, okay, well, next year we can go. I was like, all right, that's cool. So I have to hold her to that because everybody was so amped to go, and I was so excited because I've seen pictures and I saw everybody tweeting about it the last time, and I was jealous, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah. No, it's like I said, I really hope that it can all be put together and, everything will be kind of cleared up and everybody will feel safe. And, that's what we all want. We don't definitely want anybody, but yeah, it was a bummer. So we'll see. The idea is that, it's not something we're ever going to give up on. So, at some point this all has to clear up, right? I guess. I hope.
Fingers crossed.
I hope.
Because I've been to the Dallas Fantasy Football Convention, which is completely different than
that's what I heard.
No offense to them, I wasn't really a fan of it, and it was more of a grab autographs from sports guys that I don't care about. So it's really cool getting to meet people I got to meet Liz Loza, and now we're real tight, and a bunch of the smaller guys like Beer Fueled Fantasy and Eat Sleep Fantasy and stuff right there, and that was really dope. So to be able to converse with people that you talk to on the internet is pretty dope. So pretty cool you came up with that.
Yeah, well, it was one of those things where, again, living in Canton all my life, and as I got deeper and deeper into fantasy and, knew the people at the hall, I kept kind of just bugging their ear kind of thing, like, guys, this fantasy stuff's kind of a big deal, right? Oh, yeah. And I'm like, we really should do something here. Okay. Yeah. Well, let me know. And then, it was always it's too much. We can't do it because it's 2 weeks after Hall of Fame. I'm like, yeah, well, it's 2 weeks after. You're done. You could, now you can rest and do this easy little project. They're like, no, I can't do it. The problem, they'll do the draft. Mm-hmm. The reason they won't do the other one is because, one, they want way too much money to do it. Number two, they want to bring in Hall of Famers, which is great. But then they want me to pay for it. And I'm like, I don't want Hall of Famers there. As much as I think it's cool that you can have some Hall of Famers there, not a lot of people care about Anthony Munoz or, you know, I mean, yeah, he's a good player and great player, Hall of Fame worthy, no question. But, you know, now you get Dan Marino, or you get, you know, Joe Montana or somebody that's a big deal. It's one thing, but they couldn't do that. And it just became a mess. So I just decided to do the expo on my own at another civic center area, about 2 miles from the hall. And it worked out perfect. And I think it's easier that way. So we'll continue to do that. And I'm on the calendar for next year on both of them. So we'll get there.
That's so awesome. I'm so glad that you've done that, and you've done a whole lot for the community. But I want to go back to getting started in fantasy football. How exactly? I know you've been asked that question a million times. I've heard you answer it a million times. But for people who are living under a rock and don't know how you got started, you want to go ahead and just kind of give me the summary of all of that?
Got it. So I've been playing fantasy football longer than most people in this industry have been alive, including yourself. I started in 1985. My friend came home from a bookstore, has me come over to the house, and he holds up this little book, and the little book just says Playing Fantasy Football by Chris Charpentier. And he goes, check this book out. So read this. Tell me if you think we can do this. So I read through it. It's a pretty short book. Yeah, we can do this. Why not? Of course, we love football. You know, this would be fun. And at the time, I've always been an accountant. So I actually worked at a company that actually had personal computers, which was, you know, had that 256K floppy disk hard drive that I could run Lotus 1-2-3 on. And I could do the little spreadsheet each week that would put the scores and the stats and all that kind of stuff on the sheet. I would put them in the mail every Wednesday to all 12 of the owners with stamps on them and mail them out so they could get them on Friday. And then on Sunday morning, my answer machine was jam-packed after church with about 23 messages from all the owners who made changes and their phone calls. Hey, I want to start. These are my lineup for the week, blah, 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 blah. And then 15 minutes later, I just found out he's not going to play. Change it to that guy, blah, blah, blah. So my wife was always very excited that I came home to 23 messages every Sunday. And then Monday morning, and Tuesday morning, I would get the USA Today paper, and I would get all the touchdown only stats, because we did touchdown only, because I'm like, I'm not doing, there was no such thing as PPR back then, at least not in my league. And long story short, now almost 35 years later, we still have the same league. We still have the same scoring method, and 7 out of the original 12 are still in it.
So cool. So all those commissioners out there that are complaining about having to do stuff now, imagine having to go check your answer machine.
Yeah. So obviously, we did live drafts, did that for a lot of years. And it's funny because we called ourselves the Hall of Fame Fantasy Football League, which made sense because we were in Canton. But the other reason is that's where we did our draft every year. So about the second year, it was 1990, which is my first year of driving for Hall of Fame weekend, which I know you've heard that story before about how I do that. I asked one of the people that worked there, I said, hey, we do a fantasy football draft. And they looked at me like I was an idiot in 1990. And we'd like to hold it here at the hall. Can we have, could we rent one of your rooms? They're like, oh, you can have the room. You guys are volunteers. All you got to do is pay for entrance to get in, which was like $5 back then. So we all paid $5. We all got to tour the hall. We did our draft. Didn't think anything of it. Like, we were trendsetters or anything in 1990, but we were. So that was kind of fun. And then finally we stopped doing that and we just started doing it like at people's houses and that. People, get married, have kids. Wives don't want you running out and being gone for 4 hours when there's 3 kids at home. So we stopped that and we did it more routinely at home. And, so that's where it's all went. 2002, I came up with the consistency concept when my team did not make the playoffs. We were the second highest scoring team. I had Sean Alexander, the MVP that year on my team. He scored 15 touchdowns, but the problem was he scored 5 of them in one game, 3 in a game, and 2 in a game. So he scored 2/3 of his touchdowns in about 3 games. The rest of them he got zeros. Therefore, well, not zeros, but he didn't get hardly any touchdowns after that. So my team went 7-7, and I'm like, man, if I could have scored 1 touchdown a week of those 14, 15 touchdowns, I would have made the playoffs, won the championship. Man, if you're just more consistent. And that's where it all started. And so I'm like, wow, if I could do that. And of course, Excel's a thing then, and started building spreadsheets, putting in stats, weekly stats of, calculating it with PPR, non-PPR and all that stuff. And again, long story short, here we are today with the guide and this website and the consistency reports. You could put in your own scoring methods to find out how consistent your players are. And it just, one idea has grown from the other. And, doing this almost 20 years of writing and putting consistency information out there, it's just gotten me to this point. And I'm honored and blessed that, I kind of started early and got in on the ground floor. And, now everybody kind of, at least understands or respects the concept of consistency. They may not use it all the time. They may even disregard it, but they understand it. So that's cool.
Well, I know a lot of people disregard it when they want to make the narrative fit their players. So,
that's true, yeah.
I mean, I can't say that I haven't done that before, but you're speaking of your consistency guide, since this is like probably one of the bigger things that you're known for. Probably, I would say probably the biggest. Like, everybody has their own little thing, but yours is a little thing. It's a big thing. When you first created it, was it just intentionally for yourself, or did you think, I'm going to publish this and put it out for others?
No, how this came about was for years, probably 6-7 years prior to the first guide that I ever put out, I had the honor and was blessed to have some of these guys who put magazines on the shelves. So one of them was Peter Kurtzer, who puts out the Fantasy Football Guide itself. And he allowed me to write an article about consistency in it. And it was only like one of the pages, but, got my name out there, got my email, my website. And, and I kept saying to him, man, it'd be cool if we could add the consistency information right into the profiles. So you could have like, here's their stats and here's their fantasy points scored, but here's the consistency of how they're doing it. And he goes, I like your idea. But he goes, I don't have any room in this thing. He goes, if I add all that stuff into it, he goes, this is a 400-page document. He said, it's already, very small print and tight. And he goes, but I love your idea. And I'm like, okay, cool. So like I said, that goes on and on and on. And then finally, I don't remember how I came upon the idea that I could self-publish stuff on Amazon. And I think that's where it kind of was the real kind of, light bulb above the head. Was, I can self-publish? How much does that cost? Oh, nothing. You mean you'll do this for me? I just take a portion of my proceeds? Interesting. So that's what I did. And so, I put it out there and kind of had my idea. I wanted to look like a fantasy football magazine with profiles and all that. But obviously, I can't afford to, buy the rights to the pictures and all that kind of stuff. So I just did black and white and put it out there and said, hey, I'm sharing this with you. If you check it out, I think the first year I gave more of them away than I sold, I'm sure, just to kind of get the concept out there. First year, I think I sold like maybe 65 copies. Thought that was even quite a bit. I'm like, wow, 65 people actually cared. And then just this past last year, now this year was down just because I think a lot of people just kind of weren't sure they were going to play fantasy football. But last year I almost sold 3,000 copies.
Wow.
And, so that's when I'm like, okay, well, I'm getting some respect and some props in this world from people other than just, my kids and their boyfriends. So this year, like I said, nowhere near that, about half, probably, maybe almost I might've got 2,000, but anyway, regardless, it was a big drop off. And I expected it.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard a lot of people like, yeah, I used to play fantasy football. I'm not sure I'm going to play. I don't even know if the NFL is going to happen, blah, blah, blah. A lot of people I talked to said their leagues just kind of were like, let's just wait and see what happens and wait till next year. And I totally understand that, respect that. And that's kind of how it's went so far. Like I said, the guys like Joe Pisapia and some of those other guys that put out magazines, we all support each other. We tweet out, hey, if you're going to buy this one, buy that one, because we're all kind of, even though we're competing for the dollar, we're also feel like we're not conflicting. You know, we're not writing the same thing. He's got a different concept. I got a different concept. What's that guy's name? Not Matt Ryan. Jeez, Al.
Well, maybe him too.
Anyway, yeah, him too. But you know, so there's people putting out there, and the cool thing is I've had people like Murph and those guys from over in UK who've put out their own magazine. You know, I've got friends in Brazil, you know, that joined the King's Classic this year that did a whole article for my magazine for the consistency of IDP. And so that's the awesome part, is this whole community coming together and helping each other and supporting each other and, you know, saying, hey, look, Bob did it. If he can do it, I can do this. You know, how did you do it, Bob? And they'd ask me, and I'd be like, yeah, please go for it. So they write their own and they publish, and you know, the more we keep growing this, then that's just, everybody's just helping everybody out and providing new and invaluable insight from their perspective. And I think that's fantastic. So if I had a little bit to do with that, then I couldn't be happier.
I think that it's super awesome that you're getting everybody involved. And I think it's super awesome that you self-published it and put it out there yourself. I was looking on Amazon earlier and saw all the good reviews and how excited people were to be able to like actually have that, either the hard copy or a PDF or whatever, just to have that. And I know that you've given me a couple of them just because of the Scott Fishbowl and stuff in the past. And they're like just super awesome information. It's really cool that you've been able to do that. And the fact that you also, what was it, 2018, that it won Best Fantasy Football Publication with the Fantasy Sports Writers of America.
Yeah.
So how, I know you've been nominated a lot as well. How did it feel to like get that win?
That, you know, it was one of the first nomination, I think, is what caught me off guard the most. Because, you know, I knew they had these awards. I knew I had to submit it. And the first 2 years, I kind of felt like, no, I don't feel this is, you know, they're going to laugh at me. This is not worthy, you know. And even 2018, I was kind of like, okay, I guess it's a little bit of better magazine now. It's got a cool cover, you know. You know, so I sent it to the FSWA guys. I really didn't expect much. And then, you know, this thing pops up in my notifications with this tweet from FSWA that says I've been nominated, you know, for Best Fantasy Football Publication of the Year. And I literally I probably blacked out at that point. I just stood there and just looked at my computer because I was at work. And I think somebody walked in my office and they saw the blank stare on my face. They're like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, sorry, you know, and of course, I couldn't tell them what was happening. They wouldn't understand. And so it was just, yeah, it was amazing to me. The next year I got nominated. I'm like, all right, that's cool. You know, the first year I had to go, I was competing against Bob Harris and Football Diehards magazine and Chris Harris. So I'm like, okay, you know, the second year, I don't remember who it was that was competing against. And, you know, they said, you know, they sent out an email to everybody who's nominated and they said, okay, give us your cell phone number. Tuesday night, we're going to do the awards live on Fantasy Sports Radio. We will call you or text you right 5 minutes before. We'll have you on if you win. I didn't even think anything of it. I kind of forgot it was even going to be on. And so I'm sitting there on the computer and I'm doing stuff, you know, and all of a sudden my phone buzzes and it's a text and it's from Fantasy Sports Radio. Hey, Bob, you won. You're going on a 5. I'm surprised you didn't hear me scream in Dallas. My wife is in the other room. I think I scared her to death. And I just went, oh my God, I won. And so, yeah, so it was, that was just, I can't even tell you. I to this day, I mean, I have it sitting right behind me here on my table, and I still look at that and I'm just dumbfounded that I could win, you know, that award. And it got nominated again last year. And, you know, it's just an honor to be recognized by your peers. To win was just, yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, you know, pretty much could die at that point. Right. And just, I'm good. Thanks. But yeah, it was fantastic. I was honored, definitely, for sure.
That's so awesome. I'm glad that you got rewarded for all the hard work that you put into it and everything that you do for the community. So it's really rad to see that. Big Guy Fantasy Sports is your baby, your thing. Can you let us know more about that site, how it came about, and what you guys are doing over there?
Right. So, when I started the first couple of years, I actually had the name of ffconsistency.com. And while I liked that name, it certainly told you what it was, fantasy football consistency. What happened is in my head, as I started to grow this concept, I said, you know what? I would really think it would be cool to do consistency for head-to-head baseball, basketball, head-to-head sports. Consistency is consistency. So I then finally decided that I was going to go with something that was a little bit more kind of, I don't know what you call it, just kind of fun name. And so as I was growing up with all my group of friends, we kind of just called each other big guy. It's just kind of thing. Not all of us are grossly overweight, but it's just, we just, big guy, what's happening? Hey, how's it going, big guy? Hey, nice big guy. So just kind of like, I said to him, hey, I'm going to call the site Big Guy Fantasy Sports. They're like, okay, cool. So we did. So that's where it all came from. Nothing ingenious. And, so we did. We added baseball this past year. We're really excited about it. We have a consistency report on the site for head-to-head baseball leagues. And we did track the, about 8 weeks that they played this year. And we have that data plus last year's data in there to move forward. We're really hoping, the long-term goal to have a fantasy baseball consistency guide. I think that would be awesome. But that's not my specialty. So I'm trying to find people that can want to buy into that concept, move forward with it, and help me out. Cause I only play in one baseball league and it's really just for fun. Cause like that. But I think there was some really good information. And so that's what we want to move forward. And, maybe we'll get hockey and basketball and, whatever else we can get in there from a consistency standpoint. And so that's the idea, is to expand on the consistency data, to expand on the sports, and give people, that kind of all-encompassing, different, unique approach to, fantasy sports and the consistency that's important in picking those players when you're playing in a head-to-head format. So
awesome. Yeah, I know it's a good resource for everybody. I know I check it out every now and then. You guys have a group of writers over there too. Is that another thing that you guys got going on over there?
We do. So the two guys have kind of been with me all along. Have been Colby Conway, who also writes for Fantasy Alarm, and Ron Rigney, who has been part of Fantrax and some other ones as well. Ron is actually very big in the baseball world. He does the Nasty Cast with Van Lee and oh gosh, I just went brain dead on the other guy, Nathan Dockin. And so they do a great job on baseball. So Ron kind of helps with the baseball side. Colby is, deep into football, but does some baseball as well. And then we just added some new guys. We got Bobby Smith, who just started doing the Fluke and Flames, and David Katari, who has his own site, Guru Fantasy World. And he's also helping with doing the weekly fantasy waiver wire stuff based on consistency. So cool new aspect there. So a lot of good guys. We got some other guys that we're working on in the baseball world. Hopefully we'll get them back and they'll be rolling once that gets going. But that group, one of our other guys that had been with us for quite a while, probably the last 5 or 6 years, is Mike Neese. Mike Neese. For those who don't know Mike has been a long time writer and fantasy sports champion at doing what he does best. And sadly, we lost Mike a couple weeks ago to just a delve of illnesses. It was a really sad thing. I kind of really, him and I kept in touch by phone, and like 2 months ago, he lost his wife. And then I knew that it was just going to be a matter of time because they were so close. And finally, just, the illnesses and his health just got to him. And so we lost Mike, and we'll miss him a lot. And he was a great guy to talk with, but yeah, Mike was with us for quite a while. And so he's moved on, and, we miss him a lot. So, but yeah, a lot of good group of people, always looking for folks. If you got an idea in the consistency world or just a new twist of stats, let me know. We'd love to have you come aboard and be a part of it.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was going to get to next, was just basically what kind of advice you have for the people out there that are a little nervous, a little shy, or just not really sure how they should dip their toes in the water of being a part of the fantasy football industry.
I mean, everybody, I think the thing I try to tell people is, make it your own, but make it different. I mean, we all know that, Alvin Kamara is really good. We all know that, McCaffrey is really good when they're healthy. Mm-hmm. But what can you bring that somebody doesn't have, or a twist on something that's out there? Consistency was in place before I started writing about it. I mean, Tristan Cockcroft, longtime ESPN guy. I mean, he said, he actually reached out to me when I started in this and said, "Hey, I really like your concept." And he said, "I've been writing about consistency in fantasy football since 1999. I said, "No, I didn't, but thank you." But he was, again, very helpful. If that's your concept, that's your calculation, go for it, drive it forward. And that's what I would tell anybody. But the thing is you got to be different. If you just write stuff or just throw stuff out there to be different without any kind of support or backing or knowledge or something to hold on to, the people can hold on to, you're just going to kind of get, I won't say forgotten, but you just will get passed by. And people and a lot of, sites, especially the bigger sites, will give people opportunities, and that's great. But, I think in the end, you have to be different. Everybody can read the same thing from every site. But, good writers are good writers. I mean, I know you're a great writer, and, now you're with the fantasy footballers, right? Right. So they recognize your talent, your abilities, and that you bring something different. And that's why they have you, and good for them. So that's what you got to be. You got to pay your dues. You got to put stuff out there. Don't be an a-hole, please.
Yes.
Don't be the fantasy counselor. Respect everybody in this industry, and they will respect you. It's very simple. And that's what you got to do. And be supportive, get in leagues, make connections, come to the Fantasy Expo next year, please. Not because I want you to come there. Because it's fantastic for everybody to get together. I mean, Casey, that Saturday night at BW3s is going to blow you away. And I can tell you that right now.
I think that looks like something I'd really.
I wish I could have gotten a massive camera and held it over that group, because there was 80 of us or 70. I don't know. It was a big group. We literally had the whole back area. There might have been 8 other people in the front part. Mm-hmm. And if we get the people that talk about coming this year, we might just take over the whole place. It just may not be even humanly possible for anybody else to get in there if we do that. Somebody even asked me about renting out the place. I asked the place, and they said, "No, you can't do that because, and I said, "That's fine. We don't have to. We're all going to walk in, and they're just going to realize we're there."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just so cool to see, people and they're, kind of newbies in the industry. And then there's, Brad Evans and Marcus Grant and, who else? Andy Behrens, Dave Richards, Mike Clay. Bob Harris. Everybody anybody is there. And, and you and I are just barely somebody, right? So, the only reason I don't tell people, the only reason I'm in this league is because I put it together. That's plain and simple.
No.
But it's just awesome that again, those guys have the exact same respect for me, you, and anybody else there. They'll chat with you. They don't have an attitude. They don't talk down to you. They'll argue football with you just like you'll argue football with, your brother or cousin or somebody else. It's great stuff. And, like I said, it was a blast. I'm really looking forward to hopefully all happening this year. And a lot of the new people like you and many, many others who are very excited about coming out do come out, because, the idea is to make this kind of fantasy football's greatest weekend. That's what they call the Hall of Fame weekend and have for years. It's football's greatest weekend. The idea is that we make this into fantasy football's greatest weekend. And, we've got all the hotels and places to do it. So now we just need the people. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, I know everybody on Twitter is a buzz. And speaking of Twitter, I know when you started, Twitter wasn't a thing. No, Twitter was not a thing.
No.
No, but
the internet was not a thing.
No. But, you know, I think Twitter seems like that place right now that everybody's putting out content and is able to show what they're doing. And even if they're not with a site or anything, they're just putting out their own, you know, blogs or whatever. It's really cool to see that. How do you think the Twitter community has come, you know, to be so big, and why do you think people are drawn to this platform?
I think they're drawn to the platform for a couple reasons. One, unlike Facebook, you can post your articles and people will see it. Mm-hmm. You know, I used to post my stuff to Facebook because I thought it was cool that all my friends and family that were, you know, following me could see that. And then I found out a couple years ago that that's not true, that not everybody sees it, even if they follow you. And because I was putting stuff out about the expo and all this stuff. And I had people that I know were followers and good friends of mine said, never saw it. I'm like, what? And then I read something, you know, somebody had posted about how there's algorithms and all this crap. And if, you know, and I'm like, okay. So, you know, Twitter is the place to put all that stuff, share all that stuff. And I think it's a great thing. I love the chat rooms. You know, we can create chat rooms for the Scott Fish Bowl with the pick 107. I think you were in that one with us. So all that kind of stuff is super cool. You can create a quick chat group and, you know, and keep up with each other and follow along. And, you know, it does get a little bit excessive when you get quite a few followers because it's hard to see everything. I know the one thing that I would say that I'm not very good at, and it's kind of on purpose, is I don't tweet a lot outside of my articles. And it's not because I don't want to share the information. It's just because everybody is, you know, so, you know, somebody gets hurt, 10,000 posts go up.
Yeah.
You know, if you're following me to get fantasy news information, you're following the wrong person. There's 10,000 other people that are doing a great job of it. Good for them. I'm putting my articles out, sharing information about consistency. You know, obviously when the magazine comes out, I'm out there more pushing that, you know, but a lot of times I'm also, hey, I'm giving away 5 free copies today to the next people who follow, or, you know, somebody's a veteran, you know, I mean, just that's my way of kind of sharing the information with the public, as well as promoting the brand at the same time. So, you know, I kind of back off during the season and kind of just put the articles out there, the guys that are writing, we put out our podcast, all that kind of cool stuff. And, you know, the people know who we are and they know what we're about. So I don't really have to do that much during the season. And then I kind of kick it back in when the guide gets rolling then in April, May or whatever.
That's cool. I mean, totally get that. I post a lot, but my Twitter was basically my personal Twitter account before it was ever a fantasy football account. And I'm like, well, you know, it is what it is. And I don't think that it's going to change, but I like what you're doing because it's nice and streamlined and you get what you need and you don't get a bunch of the same stuff over and over, like you said.
Yeah.
And you had brought up like, don't be a dick, which is something that I think 3/4 of the people can agree with. And the other fourth is, well, they're dicks. But do you ever have to deal with trolls or people that are like coming at you? Or are you one of those people that, since you don't tweet like more than, you know, like the person that tweets all the time, you don't have to?
Yeah. I don't get a lot of those. I've gotten some, more often than not. I know obviously when I was first kind of growing through Twitter that somebody would troll me and I fell for it. You know, I was like, oh, but how do you say that? You know, I remember one time somebody wrote an article about how consistency was completely unimportant in fantasy football and how his teams were doing great every year and he had nothing to do with consistency and blah, blah, blah. And somebody actually found the article and tagged me on it and said, see, your stuff is worthless. And I said,
yeah, right.
Okay. And I said, what's funny, because I said in the article, the guy mentions like, you know, 4 or 5 players that he drafted the past year. And I said, you realize that those 4 or 5 players have been one of the most 4 or 5 most consistent players over the last 3 years. Just say, he may not realize that. And he may think that he's a genius, but he drafted 4 really consistent players. So he did exactly what I told him, you know, that I would have written and told him to do. Not that I knew the guy, but, you know, it was just like, so but then the guy kept coming and I just finally said, look, you agree with what you want. You believe what you want. doesn't bother me. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. And, so over time, most people know that, look, if you want to argue with me, that's fine. I used to have people all the time when I was first started all this stuff. This doesn't make any sense. Why would you do this? Just, how this guy wasn't consistent last year. Why would he be consistent this year? And again, if we all knew the answers, we'd all be filthy rich because we'd all be winning in Vegas, right? Mm-hmm. I'm putting out data that says here's players that have been consistent based on the fact that nothing drastically has changed with their team or offensive line or whatever the case may be. I expect them to be consistent again. If they're not, there's probably reasons. I mean, let's be honest. This year is a complete mess.
Yes, 100%.
I can't tell you how many weeks, every week I'm apologizing on my podcast. I'm so sorry for this player. I know I told you to draft this player. I drafted this player, but he's hurt and he's out 6 weeks. So, I mean, I literally am having the worst fantasy season I've had in my history.
Oh, wow.
And it's only week 7.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never had teams be 0-6, 0-7, ever.
Yeah.
And I played 30-some teams a year, 30-some leagues a year. Never have I been 0 at anything after maybe week 3. Mm-hmm. I'm 0-7 in a number of leagues that I'd not, but Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, my 3 running backs in one league.
And there's nothing you can do about that.
There's nothing to do about it. This week I played against a guy that had Frank Gore and Rex Burkhead as his starting running backs. But guess what? He also had Tyler Lockett, who scored 60 points in the scoring method we play it. Yeah, he scored half of his team's points, and I lost like 120 to 104.
Yeah, it's a very fluky, what is going on kind of experience we're having to deal with. I'm the same way in my leagues. I said yesterday, I was like, I'm just ready to be done with playing fantasy football for the time being and just talk about it. I'd rather just talk about guys, about the misfortunes and not be the one who's having to deal with the misfortunes, but it's happening. Mm-hmm. And you said that you're in 30 some odd leagues. How do you balance being in that many leagues and then doing, all the fantasy work that you do as well?
Well, it helps when you're a CPA and you sit in front of a computer all day long, because then you can kind of do a little work, do a little fantasy stuff, do a little work, do a little fantasy stuff, especially when you're working from home, which is even cooler because like this here is my fantasy football stuff. Right beside me is my work computer. So I have this plastic thing on the floor that I just slide back and forth. So that helps quite a bit. I'm also, 57 years old. I'm empty nested. I don't have any kids to deal with now. They're all moved out, got their jobs. They all moved on. My wife is pretty much after 35 years accepted that this is my life. And so that helps tremendously as well. So, it's, I just, I write my articles, do my stuff. So there's my research. So I know what the players and who's doing well and who's being consistent. Go in, waiver wire, do all the waivers for all the teams on Tuesday, and and then Wednesday, see what I got. Do any other, do lineup checks, So it's just part of the routine. I don't watch a lot of TV. Mm-hmm. It's just been my life for so long. It's like if I do 10, I can do 50. I mean, it's just an extra 2 minutes to look at her thing, And you can only do so much anyway. Let's be honest. I mean, whatever's on the waiver wire is on the waiver wire,
right?
You may get lucky and get 1 or 2 players to fill in a bye week or whatever, and you hope they do well. But there's not much more you can do. Most people don't trade in these leagues because 1, they're either not allowed, or 2, everybody's a genius. So I'm not trading with you because you're blah blah blah, and I'm holding all my players and. So I do very little trading. So, it is what it is, but it's fun. And, I never say no to anybody. If somebody asks me to be a league, I'm always, oh yeah, sure. Let's do it. So it's fun. So a lot of them are for charity. So that's always cool too.
Yeah. I think that's the only reason I'm allowed to be in as many leagues as I'm in is I'm like, well, there's a charity aspect to it. Right. So right. More, yeah. So are you one of those people that on Sunday when the games are going on and everything, you're focused and paying attention to football? Or are you paying attention to football and your fantasy scores? how are your typical days?
You know what I did all day on Sunday?
What'd you do?
For 5 hours, I was outside raking leaves, mowing my yard, my mother-in-law's yard.
Yeah.
So here's what I have found.
Okay.
When you're in that many leagues, you can't watch football. You can't. Because one, you're like, oh my gosh, there's touchdown. Oh, wait a minute. How many leagues was that? Am I playing against that guy? Oh, crap. No, that's a bad thing. I mean, yeah, there are certain leagues, obviously, that I want to do well in, Kings Classic, various ones like that. So I will focus and look at those maybe during the day on my phone, just like, how am I doing? Oh, okay. But yeah, I can't sit and watch. I'm also a Browns fan, so you know what kind of heart attack that can cause me on a weekly basis. So it's hard to watch those games. So I just have found that, you know what, I'm just going to go out and relax and step away from football while it's on and see what happens when I get back in and see how it all flushes out. Because the way I look at it is, if I sit there, I just would scream at the TV and yell, and it's not a pretty scene.
No, for real. I mean, I did that kind of yesterday with the Cowboys game. I was like out running errands, and my mother-in-law's in town and everything. So, you know, we were doing stuff. So the bar we were at, we went to a wine bar and they had the game on, but I'm like, I'd rather just pay attention to what's going on around me. It is more productive that way.
Yeah. Especially as a Cowboys fan yesterday. Holy cow.
Holy,
what
man.
happened?
Wow. It's just the season. Whatever. 20. That's all I can say is it's 2020. Yep. While Baker's out there throwing 5 touchdowns or whatever, like. But so this podcast is basically to get to know you more and to also help people that are like trying to be in the you know, in the know and in the come up and everything, which you having that knowledge because you've been doing it since, you know, back in the day. Was there anybody when you first started out that you went to though for advice, or just like kind of, or like even modeled some of the stuff you were doing after?
There was, and believe it or not, it was a baseball guy. So I don't know if you know the name Ron Chandler.
Maybe. I don't know.
So Ron Chandler, have you ever heard of the Baseball Forecaster?
Yes.
It is an annual magazine. It's about 300 pages thick. Ron created the Baseball Forecaster way back in the early 90s. And when I started getting into the consistency and that kind of stuff, which was the early 90s, actually, I think he started that in the early 80s, now that I think about it. He started long before. So he was I guess a Hall of Fame fantasy baseball writer, person. You know, he was the epitome of what everybody wanted to do, you know, work in the fantasy sports world. He was probably the only one of 3 back then, maybe, that was actually working full time and actually had a career in fantasy sports. And I was on this bulletin board site called Roto Junkie, mostly baseball guys. And I came up with the consistency thing, kind of presented it to them, actually wrote a few articles, put it on the site there. People kind of thought it was cool. And Ron, because he was kind of the innovator for baseball, he created what they called Fanalytics, which was basically fantasy sports analytics. He called it Fanalytics. The name never stuck, but the concept. And he was the one that created things like XERA and all that kind of stuff in baseball world, BABIPs and all this kind of stuff that I barely can remember. But he created all that stuff, and he created his own stuff in his own thing. And so that's why I kind of, you know, said to Ron, look, you've done this. You're a champion of this. What do you recommend? And he said, you know, I'm going to tell you a couple things. Number one, you know, you are being different, and you've come up with a new idea and a new calculation. Go with that, because that's what he did. He said, number 2, and he said, this is the most important thing I will tell you, is he said, you will be frustrated. You will want to quit. You will think nobody cares. And just on and on. He goes, don't give in to that concept. He said, because if you do, you may have let something slide, an idea slide that may someday become. He goes, because I be honest with you, he said, you know, I used to think nobody read this book. You know, sales were very low for the first 2 years. Nobody understood all these analytics. Nobody got it. No, you know, and he said, I wanted to quit many times and just get a real job again and go back into sports journalism. And he said, don't do that. Now, I had the luxury that I have a good job, a good paying job. I didn't need this. So I could take my time, pace myself, and put it out there. So that certainly helps a lot versus just quitting my job and trying to do that full time back then. Yeah. But he was exactly right. I mean, you can ask my wife how many times. Oh, people don't care. This is stupid. Why am I wasting my time? Nobody's reading this. You know, I think it's just me and 5 other people in this world that really care, you know, and that's what I thought, because one, I was writing for these bigger sites, Roto Experts, Fanball, that kind of stuff back then, even CBS Sports CBS Sports for a while, just for free, but it was putting it out there. And, you know, I didn't know who was reading it. I couldn't tell. Nobody was telling me, hey, 1,000 people read this. I mean, there was nothing like that back then. I just had it out there. Right. And so, you know, that was the thing. It was like, okay. And then finally, when I just said, I'm just going to do my own thing because nobody seems to get this concept other than me. I don't know if people are going to buy it. I don't know if people are going to buy a book if I put it out there, but I'm going to put it out there and we're going to see what happens. And I'm going to give away a lot of free copies so that people read it. And if they like it, great. If they don't, they don't. But maybe they'll pass along to somebody else. And, you know, obviously the tenacity and the you know, pushing through worked. But it is, you know, I know when the magazine won the award that year, somebody interviewed me after it and said, so how does it feel to be an overnight sensation? I said, well, if overnight you mean 16 years, then fantastic. Right. And they're like, wait a minute, you've been doing this for 16 years? And I'm like, well, actually I've been playing for 30. But yeah, I've only been doing it since 2002. And they're like, oh, I thought you just started writing this magazine a couple years ago. I said, yeah, the magazine. But I said, the concept's been around. I've done this concept for 16 years. He goes, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were, I'd never heard of you until, you know, you gave me this book. And I'm like, all right, well, that's fine. I mean, you know, I say consistency is the best kept secret in fantasy football. And I think it still is. Yeah, I think there's still a lot of people that either haven't, you know, caught on or, you know, haven't really dove into it, but that just means there's a lot more people for me to get to. So
yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, Ron Chandler was definitely the guy. And I thanked him numerous times since then. Every once in a while, if I see him on Twitter or see him, you know, he doesn't do much because he sold his company to USA Today. So there, how that worked out well.
Yeah. Sounds like it. Before we wrap this up, which I hate wrapping up. I could talk to you and everybody else for hours and hours, but you know, life and everything else. I got you. I wanted to go back and touch on the King's Classic and everything that goes into that and how it came about, what your thought process was with that, and like how it got so big so fast. So can you give us a little insight on that?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I always wanted to have kind of this great fantasy football's greatest weekend in Canton. Why? Because we have the Hall of Fame. So why not have it there? It is football. The King's Classic idea kind of came from, in the baseball world, they've had something for years called the Tout Wars.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
So the Tout Wars was always, and the Tout Wars drafts have been around since, again, the 90s. And I always said, man, we need to have a Tout Wars in football. And a few years ago, Jake Seeley put together the Flex, the Fantasy League of Experts in New York. And I was invited, and I went to that for a few years out to Sirius Radio in New York City live. And of course, we didn't do it live, but we did it online like everybody. And while I appreciated what Jake did, and I never wanted it to be a competition against Jake, I always felt like the problem with that one was, and again, no disrespect to Jake, was that there was no Mike Clay, there was no Brad Evans, there was no, you know, he just got guys that could make it to New York City, which was fine. So, you know, a few years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, I had heard the Tout Wars had done their draft in the locker room of the Staten Island Yankees. And they literally had it in their locker room area of the stadium. And on the lockers, each participant in the drafts had their own locker with their name on it, and had like a little symbol on it with their logo. And they were kind of, it was on Fantasy Sports Radio, so it was broadcast on the radio, but they were kind of visually trying to tell you how the room looked and how set up it was. And I just sat there and went, damn it, we've got to do this at the Hall of Fame. This would be so cool. And so that night I emailed, I think it was Mike Clay. I didn't have Brad Evans's email at the time. I think it was Mike and Andy Barron's. It's the two guys I had that I knew were the big shot, the big shots I could get a hold of. And I just sent a thing to them and I said, hey guys, the Tout Wars are doing their draft, blah, blah, blah. I explained it all and I said, why can't we do this? But we'll do it live in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. They have this huge room called the Gold Jacket Lounge. It's for, when they do the Hall of Fame weekend, they have a lot of events and it's really super cool laid out. And, we'll have the top 24, guys and girls in the country that, we'll put together a list. What do you think? I said, if you think it's something that you guys would come in for, and you could get your other friends, big shot friends to come in for, I'll be more than happy to be the legs on their feet on the ground, or whatever they call it here. And it was so funny because as soon as I sent it, I got a forward back from Mike Clay of Brad Evans's email that he had gotten 2 days prior, and said, what we need to do? We need to do a big expert draft in some cool place in the United States. And Mike says, I think you two need to talk. And so I replied to Brad. I gave Brad my cell phone and we talked, and he goes, I love the idea. I'm all in. I'll get Dave Richards. I'll get, whoever you want me to get, we'll get them there. And so we basically put together a list of the top 24 sites, names, people, and like I said, I wouldn't be in it if it wasn't for me putting it together. But anyway, so, Fantasy Alarm and Guru Lead, just everybody you could think of, and said, okay, we're going to do this. So once they all kind of agreed it was a cool idea and they would come, then I'm like, all right, who's going to present this to Sirius Radio? Because we need them to come to Canton to make this what it is. And so Brad's like, no problem. I know, Matt Deutsch really well. He goes, I'll reach out to Matt. Next day he calls Matt. We get a 3-way call with Matt and him. And I explained to Matt what I wanted to do. And he said, all right, give me the contacts at the Hall of Fame. And so I called my buddies at the Hall of Fame, said, hey, I'm going to bring the biggest fantasy draft of the best people in the country to Canton, Ohio. Will you do it? Will you let us have the Gold Jacket Lounge? And they loved the idea. So those two got together, and as they said, the magic happened. And our first year, it was just huge success. I remember we were the number 5 trending, hashtag Kings Classic was the number 5 trending on Twitter that day. We actually snapped it, picture of it, and we're passing it around. It was just a dream come true for me. So that where the Kings Classic come from. And then the next year, once that became successful, and I felt like we had that in place, then I said, all right, next year we're going to add a Sunday event and we're going to have this expo so that the guys are in town, and then we'll get together Saturday night. People for the expo will get together with people from the Kings Classic. Boom. Now we've got the super cool weekend. And so we did that once, but then of course 2020 came and it didn't happen. But that's how it's all come together. The goal is just to, this year we added a third different we added a third division to the Kings Classic because we could do it online. And basically that third division was half international and half some new sites. So we have a site from Australia, of course, Murph and the guys from UK, Brazil, Mexico, and 2 from Canada. So there were 7 of them. And then we actually expanded to 14 teams each also in the other leagues because we keep more sites, new guys, like Evan Silva went and established a run. So now we got to get Evan in, and Evan was a part of this. So we just keep growing and growing. So, so we're always going to have this third division. I think the long-term goal is to literally have an all 14-team international. But, we got to kind of let that grow on its own. But that is always going to stay as an online league because we don't have enough room at this point for all three of them to be live. Plus, I can't ask the guys from Australia to fly to games. Even though I'm not going to lie, them and the guys from the UK all said they would come. And I'm like,
I thought, yeah.
Okay, well, we could figure out room. We'll see what happens. But, that's what's cool about it is that, this is becoming international. And that's always surprised me. I mean, when I first got my first sale, I forget if it was from the UK or wherever it was. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's people overseas that are buying this guide, because you can see that on the Amazon tracking because it tells you what website it comes from, whether it's UK or Australia or Japan or wherever. And it's always like, really? I sold 5 magazines in Japan? Okay, it must be guys traveling and just bought it and had it shipped there. I don't know, but yeah, that's how it's all come about. Like I said, it's been a lot of fun and can't wait for this year. I really hope 2021 gets back to normal and everybody can come and we can make this into the biggest, fantasy football weekend in the country. I mean, I know Kent would love it. I've had conversations with the Chamber of Commerce people about growing this and getting more rooms and making this into, it'll never be what the Hall of Fame weekend is. I get that. But if we can make this into a thing, and I don't know if the Hall of Fame itself now has a for-profit organization called the Hall of Fame Village. And their goal is to build around the Hall of Fame a village kind of like Cooperstown is to baseball. Oh. I've never been there, but I guess it's a kind of a little town and there's shops and cool things like that. Well, so their goal is to continue to expand that. So I think, I'm hoping someday everything will all be at the Hall of Fame Village and you'll stay there and we'll have the events there and we'll do the expo there and the drafts there. And it'll just be, one big massive party. So looking forward to that.
That is so awesome. And totally something that needed to be in existence. And it's so awesome that you came, together and got this whole weekend out of it. It was one of the things that I was like totally looking forward to the most for this year. And it's something that I'm crossing my fingers, but totally looking forward to in 2021. Like,
me too.
It's going to be great. So, Bob, it's been so awesome talking to you. I really enjoy everything that you had to say. I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody listening is learning a lot as well.
Thank you.
No problem. Can you go ahead and just let everybody know where they can find your stuff, what's going on with you and things?
Yeah, no problem. Well, again, thank you for having me on. It's always an honor, to kind of talk about where I've been. And again, hopefully I will influence a few people out there to take that step. And, and again, you can reach me on Twitter at Bob_Lung. Anybody who wants to talk to me, chat with me, you can email me also at bob@bigguyfantasysports.com. I'd be more than happy to help anybody out, and just as I'm sure Casey would as well. And it's just, it's about getting to know people and bouncing ideas off people and, and really just, we're all here to help, I can't see any of us saying, oh, well, your idea is dumb. Don't ever think that, you should, we may say, well, it could use some work, but we won't say it's dumb. Right. So at Bob_Lung, Bob at Big Guy Fantasy Sports. Big Guy Fantasy Sports is, of course, the website. But you certainly more than welcome to help anybody, chat with anybody, give ideas, share ideas. And again, if anybody wants to write, you want to put your ideas out there, certainly reach out to us and we'll get you on there. And Bobby Smith and David both reached out to me right before the season, said, hey, can we do this? I'm like, yeah, I'd love to have it. So, I don't put it behind the paywall so people don't have to pay to see it. It's out there for them to share, So, we're always here to help. So again, Casey, thank you so much for letting me have this. looking forward to hopefully seeing you in Canton in August, and best of luck, continued success to you as well.
Thank you so much, Bob. It was great having you on. I'm sure that this is going to get a lot of people excited to find their brand, find their thing. So, all right, guys, you guys have a great one, and we'll be back next week.